Hey, my lilies. Okay, we're doing something a little different this weekend. Usually you know me to give you one episode and then send you on your way until the next one, right? But this weekend, we're switching it up. Ink and Impact is doing a double feature drop. 2 episodes, 2 different conversations, 2 different perspectives. And today, we're starting with one that's a little more personal. This episode isn't about me giving you advice. It's not about me sitting here pretending like I've figured everything out. It's about reflection. It's about looking back at some of the experiences that shaped me, the relationships that changed me, and the things I've learned about myself through them. Because sometimes you don't understand what a season was doing for you until you're far enough away from it to actually look back at it. And that's where I am with this one. So today, my lilies, I'm taking you into a part of my journey that I don't really just always talk about. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about loss. We're talking about isolation. We're talking about relationships with God. And we're talking about narcissism, manipulation, lust, and ultimately peace. Because every person I encounter seemed to bring me another lesson after a lesson. And every lesson seemed to push me deeper into understanding myself in my relationship with God. So this isn't me telling you that I know exactly why everything had happened. Honestly, I still don't know. But I know who I was then, and I know who I am now. And sometimes that's enough to tell you how far you've come. So, my lilies, welcome to Guilty by Association. Now, before I can talk about the relationships, I have to talk about what I was carrying into them. Because I didn't enter adulthood empty. I entered about adulthood with loss. My father passed away before I was even born. He died from a heart attack, so I never knew him. I was literally in my mother's stomach when he died. So I've experienced loss in a way that I didn't even understand yet. Then my grandmother passed in 2012, and then my mom passed in October of 2016. And losing my mother was different because that's the person who brought you into this world. That's the person whose love you know. And suddenly I had to understand what it meant to exist without my mother physically being here. I was an adult, but I was still somebody's child. And I had to learn how to be me without having my mom there to help me understand who I was. Then came 2019, December 1st, 2019 to be exact. That day was my final day I left my 6-year relationship, and leaving was one thing. Detaching was another. Because you can walk away from somebody and physically still carry them mentally. And you can leave the relationship and still be trying to figure out who you became inside of it. And that's where I was. I was trying to understand who I was. Not who I was when I was with him. Not who I had become to survive the relationship. But who I was as myself. And I didn't really know it yet. I cried a lot. I questioned God a lot. I had so many questions. Why? Why did this happen? Why did I choose this? Why did I stay? Why did I have to lose so much? Why did love, should I say, feel like something I had to fight for? I was in my why season, and I didn't understand how I was going to get through it. But I started building things around me that helped me survive. I created my prayer wall, and I'm still very proud of my prayer wall, by the way. I started using my planner differently. I poured into my work. I stayed busy. I stayed productive. But I also realized that I was eating my feelings. My body became one of the places where my emotions showed up. And eventually I had to realize something. I was punishing myself for things I didn't have to punish myself for. And I didn't have to isolate anymore. I didn't have to become a woman who was alone because of what other people had done to me. I didn't have to spend the rest of my life protecting myself from love because I had experienced unhealthy versions of it. But I didn't know that yet. I had to learn it. And that's where my first perception comes in. Narcissism. It preys on your gullible sense of genuineness. It preys on the gullible sense of your sincerity. Because when you're genuine, you assume other people are genuine too. When you love somebody, you don't automatically think they're calculating how to use that love. You don't think they're studying your kindness. You don't think they're figuring out how to turn your emotions on and off. But I learned that love can feel like a machine when somebody else controls the switch. They can turn it on, they can turn it off, and you're left wondering what you did to make it change. For 6 years, I learned what it meant to question myself, to over-explain, to try harder, to wonder if maybe I was the problem. And when you spend enough time in that environment, you can lose your ability to trust your own perception. Leaving that relationship forced me to detach from more than a person. I had to detach from a version of myself, the version of me that thought loyalty meant staying, the version that thought understanding someone's trauma meant tolerating what they did, and the version that thought loving somebody harder could make the relationship healthier. My first revelation was simple. I can understand somebody without carrying them. Their trauma belongs to them. Their behavior belongs to them. And my empathy does not require me to sacrifice myself. Then came manipulation. I was trying to start over, trying to be social again, and trying to believe that maybe I could still find something real. I met someone through family, and almost immediately I started hearing things like, where's my wife? Where's my girl? And at the same time, I didn't understand how powerful words could be when they're telling you exactly what you want to hear. Because if you're craving a relationship, somebody doesn't necessarily have to give you the relationship. Sometimes they just have to give you the idea of one. And I learned very quickly that manipulation is control. Control of conversations, control of emotions, control of expectations. Eventually, I realized I wasn't being looked at as somebody to build with. I was being looked at as somebody to build off of. And the distinction, but changed everything in regards to the perspective. But the biggest lesson wasn't just about them. It was about me. Because I kept wanting to be the savior. I wanted to help. I wanted to understand. I wanted to fix. And eventually I had to stop asking, why are they doing this to me? And start asking, why am I continuing to choose this? Why am I ignoring? Why am I accepting? Why am I allowing? That was uncomfortable because I wasn't responsible for somebody else's manipulation, but I was responsible for whether I continued giving them access to me. And eventually something changed. The interactions became shorter. The lessons became quicker. And I started recognizing things a little bit earlier. I wasn't learning because manipulation stopped showing up. I was learning because I stopped staying. And then came lust. And honestly, this one confused me. I don't know if it was temptation. I don't know if it was curiosity. I don't know if it was chemistry. Maybe it was all three. I met two men where the attraction felt different. And during that time, I almost felt like I was watching myself from outside of myself. I was experiencing the moment while observing myself. And also, being as spiritual as I am, I started asking myself, why am I attracted to this? Why do I want this person's attention? Why am I so eager to be around them? At the same time, I was working on myself. I was focused on my weight loss journey, and I was trying to become healthier. I was trying to discipline myself and figure out what I wanted in my own life. And that's when I realized something. Life is going to still happen while you're working on yourself. People will come into your life. Attraction will happen. Temptation will happen. But you don't get to control everything that comes your way. You do get to control what you entertain. And there were things I knew I wasn't okay with. But I still wanted their attention. I still wanted to be around them. I still wanted to give love. And I had to ask myself why. Why was acknowledgement so important to me? Why was I willing to give somebody access to me just because I felt connected to them? I started realizing that sometimes what we call chemistry familiar. Familiar. Oh my gosh, I know this word. Familiarity. Sometimes what we call attraction is validation. And sometimes what we call love is simply our desire to be chosen. One of those connections taught me that someone can be a good person and still not be the right person for you. The other lasted much longer, and eventually I learned that you cannot build something meaningful on sexual chemistry alone. You need communication. You need effort. You need mutuality. Because sex can't fix a communication problem. Attention can't fix an emotional distance. Chemistry can't create compatibility. And lust can feel powerful, but powerful doesn't always mean purposeful. And that's why guilty by association comes in. Not because I'm guilty for whatever other people did, but because I've learned that who you allow close to you can affect you. Their choices can affect your choices. Their energy can affect your peace. And sometimes you don't realize how much you've absorbed until you're finally away from it. I've learned that I can understand somebody without fixing them. I can have compassion without becoming somebody's savior. I can love somebody without abandoning myself. I can recognize chemistry without calling it compatibility. I can let somebody go without calling it loss because I don't look at it as loss anymore. I gain a piece of peace every time I let go. And that brings me back to God because every experience seems to take me down another spiritual road. Narcissism taught me about myself. Manipulation taught me about accountability. And lust taught me about temptation, attraction, and focus. And loss taught me how to lean on God when I didn't understand anything. I had so many questions for him. And honestly, I still don't have every answer. But maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe my job isn't to understand every test, but before I take it, maybe my job is to be prepared. I think about soldiers, they don't know exactly when the next battle is coming, but they prepare. They train, they stay ready. And that's how I feel now. I'm not paranoid, I'm prepared. I'm not isolated, I'm discerning. I'm not closed off, I'm intentional. I don't know if my tests are over, and I don't think it's my job to know that. My job is to be prepared when they come. Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life saying, look what they did to me. I want to be able to say, look what God has showed me through it. Because my journey is my testimony. And while I'm living it, I have to be present enough to recognize the lesson. Why am I choosing? Why am I ignoring? Why am I allowing? Why am I attracting? And most importantly, who am I becoming? Because I'm not the same woman who walked away December 1st, 2019. I'm not the same woman who cried and asked why, God. I'm not the same woman who thought isolation was protection. I'm not the same woman who thought letting go meant losing. Today, I understand that sometimes letting go is how you gain yourself back. So, my lilies, if you're in your own season right now, you don't have to understand the entire story while you're living it. Sometimes the revelation comes later. Sometimes the peace comes first. And sometimes you just have to keep walking, keep praying, keep reflecting, and keep learning yourself. Because one day you may look back and realize that what you thought was a punishment was actually preparation. What you thought was isolation was actually a season where you had to learn yourself. What you thought was rejection was actually redirection. And what you thought was loss gave you peace. So I realized what no longer belongs to me, and I release what no longer belongs to me. I take the lesson, I leave the weight, and I choose peace every time. Thank you for sitting with me today, my lilies. Not as your teacher, not as somebody who has figured everything out, just Jazz. A woman still walking, still learning, still questioning, still believing, and still becoming. This was guilty by association. And remember, your journey is still your testimony. And because we're doing something a little different this weekend, this is only Saturday's drop. Tomorrow, Sunday, there's another completely separate episode waiting for you. 2 episodes, 2 conversations, 2 different conversations, should I say. That's our double feature weekend. So come back tomorrow and sit with me again. Until then, my lilies, protect your peace, trust what you've learned, and don't be afraid to let go. I'll see you tomorrow on Ink and Impact.